Allá en el sendero nos conectamos con la naturaleza, nos sentimos más libres.
Puedes hablar con las plantas, ver los animales cantar, como los pájaros, ver las mariposas.
Uno aprende muchas cosas con las plantas porque uno ve cosas bonitas en la naturaleza, las hojas, las plantas, animales y hay algunas flores bonitas.
Sendero es una parte muy esencial de nuestra tierra, que es Santa Marta.
El sendero es un pulmón de mi ciudad.
Samarios, respetemos el bosque.
El proyecto Conviviendo con el Río Sinú de la institución educativa Juan 23 es un proyecto de convivencia ambiental en el cual hacen parte alumnos de los grados cuarto, quinto, 9, 10 y 11 que tengan problemas comportamentales y problemas académicos. Esto con el fin de que ellos mejoren sus relaciones interpersonales y a la vez los reconciliemos con la protección al medio ambiente, recuperando así nuestra majestuosa cuenca hidrográfica del río Sinú por medio de la siembra de árboles forestales nativos, como campano, orejero, ceiba colorada y muchas especies más que se encuentran en vía de extinción.
Este proyecto nos ha ayudado a tener más compañerismo entre nosotros. Hemos empezado a sembrar árboles por las orillas del río Sinú para evitar la erosión de nuestra cuenca hidrográfica. Esto ha formado que tengamos más compañerismo entre nosotros y entre compañeros con los que antes no hablábamos.
Un árbol para nosotras es como es para la vida, porque ella es la que nos da el oxígeno.
Hemos transversalizado el área con el proyecto Conviviendo con el Río Sinú. Hemos implementado una estrategia que hemos denominado ciclosiembra, la cual consiste en desplazarse al lugar de siembra en bicicleta, acción que requiere de una preparación, implementación y que enriquece y fortalece el proceso de convivencia entre los estudiantes.
Bienvenidos a la Institución Técnica Agropecuaria de Tomarrazón.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Jimena Fuentes, junto con mi compañera Yariani Miguel. Cruzamos el grado 11 de la Institución Técnica Agropecuaria de Tomarrazón, zonas verdes. Esto ocasionaba que los estudiantes en tiempo de recreo arrojaban la basura y los residuos comestibles que compraban en la cooperativa. Después de buscar muchas estrategias, se nos vino la idea de utilizar los cultivos ecológicos y que a la vez sirviera como estudio de aprendizaje o laboratorio de práctica en la modalidad agropecuaria. Y que
el segundo es embellecer la institución. El tercero, tener laboratorios de práctica para los futuros bachilleres técnicos agropecuarios. El cuarto, apoyar a los campesinos en la asesoría con la modalidad de cultivos ecológicos. El quinto, producir alimentos agrícolas libres de químicos. El sexto, integrar en las áreas del saber con la modalidad agropecuaria. En la institución contamos con 1.200 estudiantes y 9 sedes en diferentes corregimientos y veredas. Somos los jóvenes ecologistas de la IERTAC. Muchas gracias.
Somos la institución educativa Las Acacias. Estamos ubicados en el departamento del Huila, zona rural del municipio de La Plata. Prestamos los servicios de educación pública a campesinos, indígenas, desplazados y demás población que requiera nuestra atención. Nuestra institución cuenta con 10 sedes educativas y atendemos 420 estudiantes en los grados preescolar, básica primaria, básica secundaria y media. La planta de personal cuenta con un rector, una secretaria pagadora y 21 docentes. Las mallas curriculares se adaptan a nuestro contexto, transversalizando los contenidos en todas las áreas, enfocadas en los proyectos pedagógicos, como el PRAE, donde buscamos formar ciudadanos preocupados por el medio ambiente, con formación en valores como respeto, responsabilidad, solidaridad, que permitan resguardar la naturaleza y ayudar a transformar el pensamiento y actuación de la comunidad, vinculándolos de manera activa en las actividades programadas. Nuestro sector cuenta con gran riqueza en biodiversidad, nacimientos de agua, Variedad de clima. Estamos cerca del páramo de Puracé, donde nace el río Aguacatal, que recorre por nuestras veredas hasta llegar al río Magdalena. Pero también somos afectados por la explotación de madera, ampliación de parcelas para ganadería y agricultura, que conllevan a la pérdida de especies vegetales nativas y la migración de fauna silvestre. La tala indiscriminada de bosques ha dado como consecuencia deslizamientos de tierra, afectando a nuestras sedes educativas, encontrándonos en un alto nivel de riesgo. Por este motivo, los entes gubernamentales desde el año 2016 no pueden invertir recursos y la planta física se encuentra cada día más deteriorada.
Los conocimientos, la educación en sostenibilidad y el empoderamiento frente a acciones de transformación al cambio climático. En este espacio encontraremos acciones como reforestación y siembra, espacios de diálogo, articulación de diferentes instituciones y el reconocimiento de los distintos actores que participan. Este gran escenario educativo finalizará con la acción de Gran Siembra Nacional. Contaremos con la participación de ministros de Ambiente y de Educación, así como rectores y agentes de cambio a nivel nacional e internacional. Nuestros invitados realizarán sus presentaciones con una duración.
Guests will make their presentations lasting maximum 20 minutes. Subsequently, we will have a space to solve the doubts during this session. So we invite you all to ask the questions you need whenever you need them. This virtual event also has simultaneous translation in the YouTube channels with the language of your preference. So we thank María Eugenia Medina, translator and official interpreter, and Patricia Aljure, coordinator of relations at Colegio Rochester. So let's begin. But before this, we want to welcome Juan Pablo Aljure. He's the president of Rochester School in Colombia and the host of this great sustainability event.
Good morning and welcome to this important Green Generation event. On behalf of Rochester School, I extend our gratitude to the Colombian Ministries of Environment and Education, to the Colombian and United States chapters of the Green Building Council, and to the Center for Green Schools and Green Schools National Network for working with us in the organization and planning of this Environmental Sustainability Education Summit. We also want to extend our special welcome to the Colombian TT Project, St. Patrick Catholic School in Norfolk, Virginia, and Florida Institute of Technology in Melbourne, Florida. Congratulations to the students and teachers from Colombia and abroad that will present their experiences and ideas of this summit, and a special recognition to the Colombian and international keynote speakers that we will have the honor of having. Education in environmental sustainability is not just interesting. It is connected to our species' survival and to the quality of our lives of this and future generations. Welcome and enjoy this great summit.
Gracias, Juan Pablo, por su intervención. Y ahora queremos escuchar a Liliana Villalobos. Ella es secretaria de Educación en la Alcaldía del municipio de Chía. Liliana, adelante y buenos días.
Muy buenos días para todos. Un gusto y un placer acompañarlos hoy en este
Good
espacio.
morning, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here today representing this territory that today is also trying to look for a different point of view of education, to all the members of Rochester School, Dr. Juan Pablo Aljure, those of you who have always seen the government as one of their best allies in education. And I think definitely, as our mayor has always expressed, Luis Carlos Segura, who today surely is very pleased in his process of recovery, pleased to know that we're not losing these spaces and the closeness with many of these actors that are so important to transform education, not only in Colombia, but also around the world. I also celebrate the participation of the schools which have been mentioned here in this scenario. What we can see and anticipate is that we're all definitely working together towards a transformation in our educational sector, which today has been so open to change, the change that has forced us in this situation of pandemic. I basically want to summarize and give you an analysis of what this first summit represents, this first summit of Green Generation Inspiring Leaders for the Sustainability of Tomorrow. What does this have meant for the Secretariat of Education to participate in? We've seen that at the beginning of the last century, a group of teachers bet on a type of school that could be transformed into the realities, adapting to the realities of the current situation. Teachers like Maria Montessori, etc., who opened a new path to think about an in situ education, which has affected fundamentally the human relations and contact with nature. After the 70s, the 4NUP in the United States and expanded the debate by proposing that the places there are embedded in what is supposed to be the educational scenario, the stories, the habits and traditions, the identity there, amongst other aspects, constitute the education based on the site. So this means that we also here in our country will make progress as adapting to the conditions that bring change and challenges to accommodate ourselves vis-a-vis this position that today means to study in different places, looking for a different north and a different philosophy. The school, as one of the common places to study, has been affected by a pandemic without precedents. More than a year ago, we stopped attending the places that gather us for the acquisition of knowledge, and we had to look for shelter in our homes, where students have had to attend classes in a remote way. And in the midst of difficulties of a country like Colombia, we indeed have had to join and use these electronic devices and internet, which, although they are a different mechanism, have been able to join us worldwide. And today we see a sample of this because we gather here people nationally and internationally. So in the midst of so many difficulties to adapt to this reality, other pedagogists invite us to be at home, to find multiple ways of pedagogy and knowledge at home, exploring in the park, looking at the sunset, looking at stars, growing plants, cooking, thinking, reading, experiences that priorly did not have this pedagogic value, and which today have been revealed as one of the best tools and a path to take care of ourselves, the air and the value that in this situation of pandemic has acquired and generated the importance of this sustainability. Fundamental aspects which have been adopted somehow to these force, and I have to say it this way, we have cleaned our airs through strict quarantines and isolation. We had not conducted such rigorous studies with so many measures where we definitely need to comply. So we in this territory have inherited, and this has been a pillar that our mayor has institutionalized, this pedagogic thinking of the need to change this perspective about education and make our students become leaders worldwide, to recognize their environment, their traditions, the culture, the places where they live. And this will become not only a cultural heritage. Today, we can also make it a scientific heritage and legacy. Great responsibility for their preservation of the environment, and find new paths for social transformation, cultural and political transformation. And why not? Surely we also have in our hands today the most important tool to transform economically our country. I truly thank you all for your participation. Definitely to recognize that only through these spaces of education we have the possibility definitely to transform what our territories are with the contributions we make. We in our hands have the change. We in our hands have the possibility to grow in these spaces and understand the importance of the meaning of preserving our environment for our future generations. Cordial greetings, big hugs, and cordial greetings, Dr. Alhuri, to the entire community of Rochester School. It is truly an honor for us to accompany you and be part of these important spaces and remind you that our territory is your territory. We welcome all proposals and scientific innovation and progress that requires the knowledge of our territory. We need to preserve it for our new generation. So big hugs for everyone, and thank you for inviting me. Thank you for your participation. Thank you, Liliana, for your intervention. Now we give the floor to Carlos Eduardo Correa, Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development. Welcome, Minister.
Que podemos esperar unos minutos mientras el señor ministro inicia con sus palabras. Mientras llega el señor ministro, podemos darle o escuchar a Ederson Cabrera Montenegro. Él es coordinador de monitoreo comunitario IDEAM Colombia, con su ponencia sobre el monitoreo comunitario de los bosques en Colombia, estrategia para la conservación del patrimonio natural de Colombia. Adelante, Ederson.
Hola Juliana, buenos días, muchas gracias. Un saludo especial desde el IDEAM, que es el Instituto de Hidrología, Meteorología y Estudios Ambientales del país. Sí, queremos compartir con todos ustedes una de las facetas que tal vez muchos de los colombianos no conocen del IDEAM, y es el tema del monitoreo de los bosques. Por favor, me confirman cuando ya esté disponible mi presentación.
Know when my presentation is available or ready.
¿Ya todos la están viendo en pantalla? Sí. Ok, entonces, como les mencionaba, muchos de los colombianos conocen al IDEAM como la institución que genera la información sobre si va a llover o no en el país, y si es necesario sacar el paraguas para cuando salgamos a nuestras tareas, pero el IDEAM también es la entidad oficial que genera la información sobre los bosques del país. Es un instituto de investigación adscrito al Ministerio de Ambiente, es parte del Ministerio de Ambiente y es como su brazo técnico. Entonces, lo que queremos compartir con ustedes es ese proceso de generación de información sobre los bosques en el país, pero con el acompañamiento de la comunidad.
companionship of
¿Y esto por qué es
communities.
importante?
And why is this important?
Desde que, digamos, el género humano, digamos,
Ever
desarrolló
since
todas sus habilidades,
humans
ha tenido
developed
unos impactos
all
significativos en la
skills,
transformación de su entorno.
this has
Y en esa
generated a
transformación están
significant
presentes los bosques
impact.
naturales.
And
Desde la antigüedad, el hombre ha venido transformando su entorno, acomodándolo a sus necesidades. Y en estas actividades lo ha transformado de diferentes formas, o hacia usos específicos o hacia su conservación. Y esta transformación, digamos, en la actualidad ha llevado que el tema de la conservación de las áreas de bosque natural a nivel global, digamos, sea un tema muy importante. Creo que se había desconectado un momento, déjeme, vuelvo y conecto.
Sí, te perdimos un segundo, pero puedes continuar, Ederson, con...
yes, we lost you for a second, but I think you can continue. Are you able to watch the screen now? Okay, yes, great.
Ok, pues como les mencionaba, es cada vez más importante el contar con esa información.
So as I mentioned before, it's more important to have this information available. And Colombia is a small country, and its forests only represent 1.5% of what you see in the whole planet. However, thanks to these areas of natural forests, Colombia represents close to 10% of the entire terrestrial biodiversity of the planet, which is very important because it is key for all Colombians to participate in conservation and the sustainable use of all these areas. So thanks to this, in the frame conference of climate change in 2015, in what we know as the Paris Accord, they established that natural forests in Colombia and in general in the planet should play a key role in the goals to reduce the effect of greenhouse gases and the temperature of the planet in order not to exceed those temperatures that we expect by 2030. It's very important because this decision depends on the consequences that we will see in the future. In this monitoring, the objective is to strengthen the capacities on both sides. That is, that government institutions, with the information they generate, can feed and nurture the capacities of the communities of those areas of natural forest. And with the knowledge day to day, they can feed the processes of generation of information that institutions like IDEAM generate. So that's the fundamental basis of participatory community monitoring. And this is seen at different layers, regional, national, and local. And to comply this task, this system or structure establishes different components or stages to generate information: digital processing of pictures, analysis of models of projection, indication of the causes for the deforestation, detailed knowledge of natural forests through parcels, and a very important component that you see there on the screen, which is participatory monitoring, because without the knowledge of the communities, it will not be possible to establish an important link between what happens in the reality of territories and the information reported through communities. And this is generated in two components: in the generation of information and digital pictures. The image that you're seeing is like a picture, a photograph of the country in 2019. And this is a picture that is taken by different satellite systems that are generating information on the planet through the generation of satellite images. And you should identify that in this brown image, it is where you can turn this data into information as to where is the forest. So each year we can identify the forest and the problems that are related. These pictures also serve to make monitorings of glacier surfaces or the behavior of crops. These pictures, when they are generated in a very frequent labs, as you can see in the second video, this way we can identify all the images of the natural forests. The satellite images tell you how the forests are breathing and how the changes we see in those processes is what we interpret through different algorithms that we have been developing. And at the end of the day, what we're informing is a complex panorama, which is the reality that we see in the territory, the forests, and into something that is very simple, that tells us whether this is a natural forest or not. Everything we do tries to simplify the complexity of nature through information that we are generating. And what we do first here is to establish what a forest is and how this can be monitored nationally. So we've developed a series of processes through space agencies nationally. We unload them, and through algorithms that we have developed, and we turn them into useful information to know where the areas of natural forests are and where we are losing them. So to such end, we need to use the official definition that Colombia has established for national forest and incorporate this into the process of information generation that we're using. This information and this process allows us to take information for the entire country at different levels: regional, department level, municipal level, and even at a level of the premises that the ministry has been working on with the communities. There's a program of payments through environmental services, and through economic incentives, the communities commit to preserve their areas. So the information of the monitoring system is seen reflected in this direct work with the communities to assure conservation of forests. And this is all related to the information. 60 or 59.8 million hectares in the country, 47% is in areas of indigenous communities, just mainly in Indian settlements and ancestral areas of these communities. That is, the forest in Colombia is not only trees or just plants. These are communities which historically and ancestrally have incorporated. We also identify that approximately 5.5% is in Afro-Colombian areas, mainly in the Pacific area and the Caribbean in Colombia. And close to 0.5% are in places where they've identified that they are in a collective property of peasant communities. Some other very important areas for forest conservation is natural parks. So close to 21% of the area of the forest with the presence of indigenous communities, and close to 16% is in something that is called natural forests. These are areas that are called the national territories, where we have extensive areas and which have a strong presence of peasant communities and rural communities that are part of this great ecosystem of natural forests that we have in our country. This integration of official intervention that we have is where we incorporate ancestral knowledge of communities, peasant communities, Afro-descendants, for sustainable management of these areas of natural forests that have been called as non-government agencies and other official institutions of the country. To the monitoring of hydric resources, it's not strange to indicate that the areas of natural forests have a better supply of hydric resources. Areas which have extensive areas have a high hydric supply, and with the low ones, they have very low supply. So hydric resources is a very important topic for communities. That is in forests. Everything has been ancestrally preserved, but we can also understand that we can preserve them when they're well managed, like, for example, fauna, flora, but also wood products, something that is called sustainable forest management to extract elements from the natural forest and generate benefits for the community. The communities are also related to apiculture. There are many initiatives of melliferous bees without a sting that are being used for agricultural products, sustainable systems of production, monitoring of biodiversity, and diversity of Colombia, where Colombia is the country with the largest number of birds registered. So this is also generating a specific work for communities, but not only with communities of birds, but also great mammals like the bear, jaguar, or reptiles. Communities are also interested in biotrade and territorial governance to know what is happening in their territories, and we generate the information together with them. Community monitoring also has supported the rhythm of learning, both in institutions of the state, as we say, we are not in the day-to-day task because we've tried to strengthen the capacity in their technologies, management of cartography or management of information generated by IDEAM in forest, water, and climate change. For this articulation, we've established a route where step by step, we've tried to go together with the communities, organizing how these exchange of information can become easier. So we start by identifying these community organizations which are adapting these processes. We've mapped around 100 initiatives of monitoring with forests and communities that we've mentioned. We've also identified the needs of strengthening the capacities, as we say. Some have emphasis on biodiversity, some others on hydric resource, and others on territorial governance. So we've designed some models and a package of processes of learning that we've called the School of Knowledge of the Forest with the forest monitoring.
Forest monitoring system, and we have also generated trust on those communities and generated spaces for strengthening those workspaces. So more than learning courses, what we have identified are exchange of knowledge. So they bring their knowledge and we bring other knowledge, and together we strengthen the capacities of each one of the groups. So this has facilitated that communities in the Amazon can exchange knowledge with communities of the Pacific, and those exchange knowledge with communities of the Andes or the Orinoco or the Caribbean, and that has strengthened the communication bonds that didn't exist before. With these exchanges, what we have been doing is strengthening the capacities not only of the communities, but ourselves also as government institutions to identify how our information can improve to get closer to the needs of the communities. Meanwhile, we can share the topics that we are strong in. For example, as I said, for example, the use of mapping, data generation using satellites, and also facilitating the interlocution spaces. And we have called the community table for participative community monitoring, where we have all the communities of the different regions of the country, as I said before, and non-government organizations, NGOs that have been working with all the communities. And it's important to mention Natura Foundation, TNC, and some others that we've been working with, but not leaving aside all the rural communities that are working with us. And we're going to show you a video where the communities are the ones working hand in hand with us. And in a summary, I could say that mainly it's in the Andean region where we have the largest amount of communities organized with regards to forest monitoring, about 30% of the initiatives, 25% in the Pacific region, 26% in the Amazon region, 30% in the Caribbean region, and 4% in the Colombian Orinoco region. So this has allowed us to make these communities interact with other communities from other countries nearby, for example, Panama, Ecuador, Peru, where they have been able to learn about other experiences of community monitoring, and they have established these communication bonds that are so important. 6 community organizations have strengthened their work protocols with all this interaction that we've had in the community monitoring table. 17 of them have strengthened their knowledge in the use of mapping and SIG systems, and 22 of these community organizations have participated in knowledge exchange with what I was mentioning, which is very important. So in all this learning that have been generated, what is most important is to be able to understand and respect the local governance systems. As I said at the beginning, it is the local communities that are every day taking care of the natural forest areas, and they always looking at the different pressures they have in those territories, both positive and negative. And it is important to have the possibility of understanding and respecting and keeping a bond with the territory, because I have been able to review, and also my tip has reviewed these, and we have direct contact with the communities. Use a clear language where we are facilitating dialogue, this local scientific dialogue, although in the local part we have many natural scientists that know better the forest more than us. To look at the community as an ally, they are co-investigators in many of the investigations that we do at IDEAM. They help us in having periodic spaces to solve doubts. We have a chat where every day we interact and we show options, generate interlocution processes, and to avoid stigmatizing local communities. Because, as I said, they are the ones in the territory subject to all those pressures that happen on a normal day. So this is a summary of to show you what we're doing at our ministry to monitor our forest. And I wanted to show you this video that we have done. It's only 4 minutes of video where you can see directly how the community see the natural forest. I'm sorry, I don't have any sound. The sound is not clear. In the human reserves, in the indigenous reserves, we have the natural forests. Taking into account the role of local communities and the forest monitoring system, we work in this community work with IDEAM. I'm sorry, the sound is not clear.
que el sistema de monitoreo, la articulación que estamos realizando en este momento y todo este proceso que llevamos a través de la articulación con el IDEAM, lo que está permitiendo es el fortalecimiento de las comunidades a través del monitoreo, pero también la oportunidad que está generando para planificar los territorios y con ello la permanencia en ese territorio.
El propósito de esta articulación.
The purpose of this articulation is to strengthen the knowledge and to give consistent information for decision making that are effective and help reducing the impact of deforestation in our country. With EDM and local initiatives, they are necessary in order to face what we have been seeing with this pandemic of COVID-19, but it is important for us to continue strengthening their processes. With the pandemics, it brought us together with the families, and we have been able to continue with the monitoring of these areas. In order to record water sources and to talk with the farmers the information that we need is collected through this system. We will start the process that we have been carrying on during these years, but we were able to overcome this situation, and we have been doing what we can do. We see how the forests behave all over the country. We have a lot of people that love our territory and that love our earth, and that is our intention, to keep moving forward. Okay, this is what we wanted to share with you so that you know that on every day in the territories there are people that are looking for the conservation of natural areas, and that from the government we are supporting the initiative so that Colombia will continue to be a forestal country. Thank you, Dr. Edelson. Thank you very much for your words and for sharing your knowledge. We have a few questions that people are asking, the people that are listening to you. The first question then, how can culture help to stop deforestation? It is very important, that comment, because as I said, the actions that we do every day, we are having a negative or positive influence on the conservation of these natural forests. The support of the citizens is key, because if we don't know why it is important to support forest or have the conservation of forests, people don't understand. And in the cultural spaces and all the participation that we can have in different areas, for example, this presentation that we're having at the school is key in order to be able to protect our forests. From education, how can the students contribute to solve this problem that you're mentioning? As I said, young people are the present and the future of the country. Of the decisions they make as of today and from now on, we would have the possibility of having conservation of forests possible. It is important to identify topics like climate change, for example, are 100% related with what happens with forests. So in 10 seconds, forests will store carbon dioxide. When we timber those trees, all these oxide carbide is released to the atmosphere, and it intensifies climate change problems. So it is key for the young people in the country to know how important it is for the conservation of forests, because they are water, stability, climate. That was another question they asked us. Why is it important to learn about this topic about deforestation? How can you learn from educational institutions? It is important to bring knowledge close to the people. Sometimes regular people, they don't identify that EDM generates information of the forests of the country, but it is a forestry authority on this topic, and we have to participate in these kind of spaces as a Ministry of the Environment to make sure that the information, or that 50% of the entire territory of the country is the natural territory, and we have forests in Colombia, most of it. So it is important for the educational community to use that information in the educational process of the students to make sure that at the end of the educational process, we know what is the real value of these natural forests. Dr. Elson, what is the relationship between forests and climate crisis? I mentioned before, forests are essential in the increase of climate change conditions, which is the increase in temperature. In many spaces, it's been said that forests are the lungs of the planet. They are part of the lungs, but what the forest is really is a regulator of temperature of the planet. In other words, we all know when we go to, hot weather, what is it to be inside the house and outside the house? Outside the house, the temperature is very hot, and inside the house the temperature is regulated, and that is the role of the forest, that the temperature will remain stable and we don't have extreme temperatures, very high temperatures or very low temperatures. If we don't conserve the forests of the planet is going to have serious problems related with these climate changes. The role of forests is fundamental for survival, not only of the human species but all the other species behind it. Why is it important to consider different cultures of different communities when we face this problem of deforestation? Yes, I was mentioning that also in my first slide. The forest has always been there as part of the cultures for several millenniums. Many cultures have it in their DNA, others don't. Like we have lost them. We don't have a direct relationship with the forest areas as communities like indigenous communities or Afro-descendant communities. They know what to do with their forests, but we have to learn what to do. So it is important to see the work done by these communities in the conservation of this 52% of forests that we still have in our country. As I said, they have in their DNA what is living in the forest without altering it. But we have to learn about biodiversity and study and have postgraduate studies in order to learn that. And it is important to exchange this knowledge because they know and we are learning. According to your studies, how does lack of education affects these environmental changes in the deforestation rate in these areas? Evaluating the forest is important. The service it provides and the economic value it has. In many areas in the Amazon in Colombia where I have been able to participate and accompany, there has been a change of knowledge as to what represents having or not having a forest. Many years ago, deforestation was seen every day, but now at least it is being considered as a factor that will alter our lives. In many areas, we used to have water everywhere. Now they have to have water reservoirs for the drought times, because they have realized that if we don't have the forest, they won't have water during the dry seasons. So that represents education, not only on titles, but knowing the value or what it represents having those natural forests living. We have another question. What solutions can be applied in order to recover the ecosystem? The question is important and key. It is a key question because many studies that have been developed in the last 100 years in tropical forests, restoration is one of the topics that is most critical for the recovery of this natural forest, but it is very difficult because we can restore trees. Trees may be easy, can take 5, 10, or 20 years, but restoring the conditions of the natural forest with the functions it had before, climate regulation, water regulation, the provision of seeds, can take about 80 to 100 years. So in the decision made by us, when we have to answer or not answer, we're going to have to see how easy these areas will be restored. The Ministry of the Environment and a goal that we have, an ambitious goal that we have in this period is to plant 180 million trees. This is one of the topics that we can start with this restoration process of many areas affected by deforestation. Thank you very much, Edson, for your words. If you could, in one sentence, tell the new generations that want to form part of this transformation, what would you say? I would say that forest is life, Colombia is a forest, and the forest is communities committed with the sustainable development of the country. We support them. Thank you very much. Edson Cabrera Montenegro is a forestry engineer with a postgraduate in spatial analysis areas, and he has a vast trajectory of knowledge in digital processing of satellite images applied in the monitoring of natural forests, leading the development and implementation of methodologies and protocols. Thank you very much. Now we will give the floor to Carlos Eduardo Correas Cap, Ministry of the Environment and Sustainable Development. It has becoming a good experience, these conversations through digital channels. I'm very pleased to be able to open up this meeting, which sums in the purpose that I have received since I received the task of being the leader of this entity and bring this to the highest priority. What we're going to see and listen to these 2 days gives us an indication of the path that we're following in many places of the country. We will start from knowing the significant experiences that will be told by the protagonists of a green generation, as we have called this meeting, the name that you, young people, teachers, and environmental organizations make a reality. Greetings, and I want to express my gratitude to Rochester School, with whom we coordinated this space that will be focused in the climate change topic. In the agenda, we have dialogues and stories about experience and educational spaces, amongst other. And on the 29th of May, to compensate the fingerprint that we generate, or the footprint that we generate, we're going to carry out a planting activity in the municipality of Chia and in Monteria. It is important, young people, young teachers, to meet constantly in order to reflect on these topics, and especially so that we start thinking how we are going to start carrying out care actions, because the planet is facing the limit time, and it needs people, it needs heroes, it needs change leaders that start to educate themselves in schools and at home. Our land is sad. Our earth is sad because it's losing its most important wealth, which is biodiversity, and this loss makes us more fragile versus climate change. So this event is going to teach us very important things about what is happening to us and what is it that we can do. So I invite you to reflection, and in your schools and in all spaces, the objectives of sustainable development, ODS, especially numbers of 4 for quality education, and number 7, accessible energy and non-contaminant energy. Number 11, sustainable cities and communities. Number 12, production, responsible production and consumption. 13, action for climate, which in addition to this event, we are going to go over many of those. I am sure that environmental education is a very powerful tool in order to face climate change. This is why we have created the National School for Environmental Education. And with spaces like this one, it reaches all the corners or places in Colombia to help with education and action. So let's think, what is it that we're going to do with what we will learn these days? How do we put that into practice? Where can we apply this knowledge? So I propose that let's start planting more than 2,000 trees, and this will happen on next May 29. All the efforts add up in our national goals of arriving at 180 million of new trees planted by year 2022. Thank you for summing yourself with the positive initiatives, and thank you very much for each of the presenters, the students, the environmental researchers, the scientists of the different environmental research institutes, autonomous corporations, lecturers, international lecturers, children, all the children that are going to share these days with us. Have fun, learn a lot, and go out and make a reality the dream of a country that takes care of its environment. Thank you very much. And move forward. Green generation. Minister, thank you very much for your words and for sharing your knowledge. As the mayor of Monteria in 2012 and 2015, he positioned the capital of Cordoba and returned the Sinú River to the city, making it a social development axis of the city of Monteria, and carried out several projects of solar energy in the city, and also fostered the culture of sustainability. And he graduated at the Afit University and is a point of reference for national and international leaders with regards to sustainability. And in his position as public administrator, he's shown how you can build sustainable territories. So before we continue, I want to remind you that this is a space to learn. And all the questions you may have, you can write them down in the YouTube chat, and we will share them here with our panelists. Now we can continue because we're going to leave you with Damian Filoud, Cooperation Advisor of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Israel, with talking about his relationship with sustainable development. We're listening to you, Doctor. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me correctly. Thank you very much for this invitation. So we're going to start with our topic, which is the education in sustainable development. And I hope I can answer what you are doing this day. I think these spaces do make the difference by creating spaces in order to see what are the fundamental topics that educate or that create these tissue between societies. And I think this is a great idea. And after the words of the ministry about the importance of what is happening today, how we can impact through education, I think we have to start just discussing this, the education to a sustainable development as an answer. And we have to talk about environmental education, and I think we have to leave it clear that this has to be a vision that has to be holistic in the good sense, that we can somehow get to those dimensions that include sustainable development, and from there on generate other responses to the areas where we are in. So what we're going to talk about now here, we're talking about generic basis about sustainability, and I think this is the ecological deficit is a symbol that helps us learn about this topic, definitions and conceptualizations. I think there is always interest somehow for defining. If we define things, it's easier to treatment, and then we're going to leave coronavirus outside. And apart from all the negative things, it does bring some support to the value of the environmental education, especially in sustainable development. And it also has a key education for sustainability in Israel. So before we start, and to leave this clear, this has two messages, two key messages. One, education and preparation. So these are the reasons why we want to treat this. We want to educate in this content to our students and our community leaders and the citizens of our country, and then for therefore prepare them, because as we said in the last year, it changes. And so these are two topics that are going to help us in our presentation. And the second part of the presentation's object is the coordination between the entities that can have impact with regards to sustainable development, education in sustainable development, and strengthening of the relationship between man, nature, and man context, which is the basis of our talk. So I'm going to start. I speak a little fast. I think you can follow me, and that is what is important. So what is the sustainable development? I think that this is part of the new century, and these are concepts that are complex in the way they are defined. There is always a definition that is easy, but any of these concepts that we want to encompass here holistically is going to depend on us having an additional step. So there is a definition, but the true value will be the conceptualization of each teacher, community leader that is going to give to this concept the sustainable development, the basis and the concepts. But the most important thing is to take these concepts and adapt them to Colombia, adapt them to each one of your regions, and understand how they impact our daily life. So in order to show you a more complex process, we are the product of a series of revolutions, industrial, technological, and digital revolutions, which generated different revolutions or changes in the communication means, transportation means, and energy sources. And they have been development that the humanity has been able to use to little by little start responding to our needs. Needs that start to grow, and the problem is that they grow in a way that is not in accordance with what the planet has to offer us. On one side, the development helped us to be what we are today, but on the other side, the development generated what we see on the screen here, challenges and problems that somehow we have to solve or face, because this is not a game for the today and tomorrow, but it is a reality to the future. There is a nice sentence here that says that the world, we did not receive it from our parents, but we have it lent from our children and grandchildren. So if we can do a good development, but the development has not been able to respect the resources that we have available, we always want more. There is always a human condition of wanting more than what we cannot receive. We cannot receive because there are limits. Everything is finite. There are bases in economy. You see those axes that they always want more growth and more efficiency. But in reality, the world shows that this is not a topic of a graph that is looking for development and benefits, but it's rather cycles. Cycles that have to be respected, and resources that exist also have to be respected in order to live in peace and in a sustainable way with our environment. We are living in a decade or in a century where it is the moment where we know more about sustainable development, but we are not able to solve our lack of behavior. I think this change of behavior is fundamental in order to be in line with what the world has to offer to us. What this generates is a ecological deficit that can be produced in different ways. I think the nicest example, or the clearest example, or the most empirical example, is the salary that you receive at the end of the month. If the salary that you receive is lower than your expenses on a monthly basis, you're going to go into a deficit. With the bank maybe can wait for us 1 or 2 months, but later on they're going to say, no, what you're bringing to the bank is less than what you're demanding the bank to give you. So that deficit somehow has to have an answer. And that is the answer that we want to give. A change in our behavior, a practical change that is what is going to generate is another reality that is going to take all these resources into account. That there is an NGO which has a very interesting message, and I want to tell you. What they do is to see how many planet Earths we need to live according to the demand of resources that as a society we are exercising. The first time I checked this several years ago, they said about 1.2 planets, zero point 0.2 planets at the time when I checked on this. We didn't have that available, but we're demanding from planet Earth to give us that. We don't have more. Things are finite, and you have to understand that they have an end. So in the last checking, that was yesterday, it says that we need 1.7 planets. From 0.2, we went into 1.7 of the planet, which is not available. Even if we want to use it, it's not available. And what we're generating is a debt for future generations and for the coming days that we have to control somehow. This NGO also has an interesting idea. Every year they check what day that we use more resources on that year, more than what the planet has to offer. So everything that we do is a debt. That by 2020, that date was the 22nd of August, meaning that on that day, the planet Earth consumed everything. Human beings consumed everything, and it was a deficit that we're not going to be able to recover if we don't change our behavior. So we are not going to talk about the COVID, but before COVID, we can talk about what we have around us. It's a new reality full of challenges, full of disasters, environmental, climate disasters, showing that we have changed the balance of the world we live in. And somehow we have to transmit this to our generations that we're educating in order to change our behavior. There is a word that I repeat very much: behavior, behavior, behavior. This idea of sustainable education is not in the ideas, but it demands action, something that needs to be done to improve. When I go to I see a school that has a environmental education, I'm very happy. And you want to know what is a definition? How do we define things? I also want to show you the characterizations or how we textualize this kind of definitions. This is the definition that talks about sustainable development in the best way recognized by the international community when we talk about sustainable development. And we know all this in the Rumble report of 1987 talks about many topics that I think make the difference. He talks about future generations, but basically about two very important variables: intergenerationalization, and this talks about future generations, where they talk about the man in Israel or any other in Colombia, any other person in Colombia. So it's the need of both parts at the same time to change this. So this talks about my person with my grandfather or my grandchildren. So we have to understand that the needs that we want to satisfy need to be satisfied in a way that they respect what the world has to offer to us, the world that we live in. Because what happens if we go over that line? The Secretary of the United States used to say about different variables that, in my understanding, makes the difference. He talks about our hands together, our children, our grandchildren, and that we were able to do the right things, or we could have done the right things. So these are essential parts of what makes a conceptualization in sustainable development. It talks about an action, which is the hands. It also talks about together, because the action needs to be done by the society. And it's talking about the future of our grandchildren. And it also talks about what we could do correctly and the consequences. If we don't do what we need to do, we are not going to be able to change. So we would like to systematize this. We would talk about three different dimensions: the environmental, economic, and social. And then we have a context. We're talking about those three dimensions that participate in a framework that is bigger, which is the cultural and political, which is sustainable in Colombia or in Israel or any part of the world. Not because it is different, but because we have to understand the context in which it happens. This is a definition, or where this is applied. Why is this important? All these consequences of sustainable development is important because we need education and preparation of future. Uh, I'm talking about education in concepts that make the difference, and preparation also, in order to be able to understand that in the world we live, we have to change our behaviors and prepare our future generations. So in the last year, we had an attack of a pandemic that hurt everybody, and I hope you're fine in your homes. But somehow in our or for us, this was very good. It had a lot of effects because it reduced the concentrations of NO2 and PM 2.5, reduction in water contamination, noise levels reduction, ecologic restoration, clean beaches, but it also generated the increase of biomedical residues or waste, equipment, the safety equipment, also waste. And these are some of the effects. And I show you this because the COVID helps us to put in a tangible way everything that we see in the field. And we see it because an image is more important than 1,000 words. So this probably happened in Colombia. It happened in Israel. The animals sort of like took over the urban area, and we saw a lot of scenes where we saw animals that were in the space which we left free there. And this talks about the impact of giving a step backwards. And obviously, the topic about waste, we have a lot of waste, biomedical waste, and the climate change topic that you're talking about. I'm talking about 2019 in China. The red areas are at the level of that dioxide, nitrogen too. And you can see here in Europe, in France, and in Spain, in March 2019 and 2020, how the values change.
I want to say that unfortunately, although this doesn't sound very good, these are not changes that will make a difference in the long term. Any change that we want to make it sustainable will have to be preserved in time, maintained in time. It won't be sufficient to do it just a specific moment like this year. We need to rethink our production methods, our energy sources, our ways of communication, transport, as I said before, to really and truly take care of the land we have, which is the only one we have until someone tells us otherwise. So that's why it's so important to value these changes and to make them sustainable. What will happen? Time will tell. Each one of us will assume responsibilities and activism within our country. Now, if I want to refer to sustainable education in Israel. I'll start with a conceptualization that you see in the webpage of the Ministry of Education, and it reads, sustainability is a democratic, optimistic cosmovision that places human dignity and liberty in the center of a profound understanding that we are all part of the life tissue that nurtures and sustains all creatures on Earth. See how that vision is it's wider, broader, more holistic. So this is the first classroom opened on the beach, along the beach, relatively to the center of the country, a school that is empowered of its context and works with by giving a class to elementary students, they can at the same time visit the beach and have classes. So what you see in front is the ocean, or what would be in front is the ocean. Now, the most important project of sustainable development in Israel is a collaboration between the Ministry of the Environment and the Ministry of Education. Both symbols that you see on the screen represent both ministries. They've cooperated, amongst others, to generate an alliance that was created as of 2004. And what they really want is to offer something different. They want to be part of the importance so that these can occur or take place. The project or the alliance as a program has two strong bases. The first one is to training of teachers. It's 3 types of training for teachers. One is more classic, the other one is more practical, and the other one is a site visit or field visits. And that's what structures the National Program of Education and Sustainable Development, and it has to do with education of birds. So it's a corridor for bird migration, and that's why it is taken within the context as a national program, which begins in elementary and finishes in high school, and the students learn how to implement the program. But what you're seeing here is mostly training to teachers to foster this program. And the second part are educational programs that need to be implemented at schools. You're seeing here some example, national and international examples used to enrich and foster this program of studies. So this alliance between the Ministry of Education, and it means that the alliance between the Ministry of Education and the environment is fundamental to take care and implement all these programs. So these are contextualized, and they are generated jointly with instructors and representatives of this program. Amongst other things, what you're seeing on the screen is there is an option of another collaboration between the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Agriculture, that is also part of this. One of the OL programs, the most emblematic ones, are the green schools that they need. I mean, it is a requirement. They have 3 levels. Every 2 years, if the school complies with the conditions, they are raised to a next level. It's like in karate, you start evolving and making progress to different categories, and it requires a study program, day to day at school, promotion of the city, or the active citizenship inside and out of schools, green visibility at school. So it is not just a program isolated in 3 recycled sections, but it should be visible day to day. And finally, a room of sustainable teachers. So we understand that these programs in particular are so strong, as strong as the weakest teacher. The teacher that, I mean, if the less knowledgeable teacher, if they understand it, that's a great progress. A school which generates or respects the principles of sustainability respects these 7 principles that I will simplify so that you don't get tired. You have to have a committed team within the community, including students, teachers, parents. Number 2, foster a relation, persons and the environment. Well, I think one of the learnings of this pandemic this year is how important the walls of a classroom are, and how important human relations and learning relations are generated in different places, not only a classroom. Another one is to have a school work plan. Number 5, to expand the knowledge base and the experiential pedagogy, a dialogue, constant dialogue with the community, and high expectations of the school graduates. Elementary and secondary, I mean, a person who graduated with bases that they can apply in the future. So the basis of all these, well, more than 40 non-government organizations which are supporting the program, which serve as database, as a basis of teachers, references, advisors, so that all these can work. All of this will only work if you truly have a balance between what the ministry is doing, what the schools are doing, and their context, which in this case, I'm also referring to the non-government organizations which work for the education program towards sustainable development. On my part, the message is clear. Collaboration to generate change. Without collaboration, it's very difficult to have these examples regarding what this education program in Israel is based on. It's alliances. while pandemic and post-pandemic, we understand that the limits are not very clear, yes, between the Ministry of Education and the environment, but there's a place where they can interconnect and collaborate with each other to become more effective. Everything begins and ends in nature and its relation with humankind. In 1962, we see the book, The Silent Spring. And in the 20th century, it was the first symbol which gave the guideline for the relation between human beings and nature, the impact that human beings have on nature and nature on human beings. It talks about maybe things that today are less interesting, I mean, for this presentation, but it emphasizes this relation between mankind and nature, how to create that path created, you know, to cross this forest and nature, understanding that the nature is the context where we live in. Mankind has to respect it in a measurable way. So here you see some of the bibliography that I used for this presentation, and then I share with you 3 articles which somehow talk about these variables. They were published in Colombia also on socio-environmental education and environmental education. Well, thank you very much for your attention. I hope this has really been an interesting presentation for you. I somehow wanted to give you a vision, a preparation for what unquestionably will be very enriching and nurturing during this summit of Green Generation. Dr. Damian, thank you very much, and especially for nurturing us with your knowledge in this summit that we're holding here between Rochester and the Ministry of the Environment. So we now have a few questions from the audience for education and sustainable development. So we begin. First question, why is it fundamental to work on sustainability within the international educational structure? Well, one of the things that we understood over this past year, and I've been talking about this for many years, is the concept of locality. Think global and act local. I mean, the river runs throughout Colombia, and then it goes to the bordering country. What happens in my country will have consequences in another country, and this has been, you know, proven with the pandemic. What happens here affects everyone else. It's a change in conduct and behavior, and assume the challenge as a society. That's where the interest in education towards the sustainable development lies, thinking global and acting local, thinking about the sustainable development goals and applying it practically in a classroom. It's a ladder that needs to be respected, but you need to contextualize it. There is a synoptic chart that is very interesting. What happens if I think global and act local? It's part of Greenpeace. What happens if I think local and act global? Well, I can be a bit of arrogant. What happens if I think local and then I act local? It's okay, but you're forgetting that there is another world outside your school, your country, your city. So it's in the end about that. Think global, act local towards a reality that is complex, but which includes us all as international society. That's why it is so important to have this international approach on education towards sustainable development. Thank you very much. How can you take actions at schools to reduce the carbon footprint? There are so many actions. What you're asking today is so beautiful, because that's what my work has been about over the past 10 years. I mean, to travel around schools in different parts of the world and share models. In fact, I confess, I have my footprint somehow in Colombia, in cities like Monteria or Paipa. I've visited many times, and we've worked precisely on sustainable development, and this can be tangible and can be seen. I mean, changes that really reduce the carbon footprint. But it goes beyond this. It's not only about reducing the carbon footprint, but also about changing the behavior at schools. It has to do with waste. It has to do with the economy of the neighborhood. It has to do with contextualizing and understanding what is happening. I can give you an example of a rural school at school, which started planting carandula. I think it's a flower, a local flower, and based on it, it generates creams and oil. So they teach students to transform these petals into oil to sell them and generate income for the school. So I can think of an endless number of examples. A school which generated a water museum within the school to talk about what water is, how to take care of it. There is an endless number of examples, but here one first step is to really internalize these values of sustainable development and see how to apply them. In one of my articles, I talk about 7 pedagogic reflections that need to be applied at schools, within schools, and with educators to internalize this sustainable development. I hope this article, you're able to read it. COVID-19 brought many obstacles to economy internationally. How have all these problems affected environmental development? Well, there is a list of some positive and negative aspects of COVID. I truly think, as I said it in the presentation, I think COVID at a level of environmental education gave proof of the damage we're generating with this conduct that doesn't respect the existing resources. I was talking about a topic of, making beaches dirty and placing dirt. So what positive and negative effects did COVID generate in the world we live in? Ask yourselves that and you will be, what am I referring to this when I say this? Changes are at sight. I mean, you in Colombia or I in Israel, it's just about, taking a walk around and see how stations have changed, understanding how waste is, piling up and nothing disappears. I mean, it has to generate, it will generate some impact. It's at sight, and if it's not clear, it's just to take a step ahead, like the pictures I shared of the pollution at a level of country and see what impact it has and how these will impact climate change or the ozone layer. So it goes beyond this. The point is, COVID unfortunately gave us an opportunity to understand the impact of our conduct. It was very difficult to stop, a powerful country like Chile and say, stop everything, or France and tell them, don't produce anything else, anything more with CO2 gases. It was impossible. But somehow COVID did it. And it showed us in a more tangible way how true this bad conduct in the classroom, for example, in the planet Earth, is and what consequences it has. So I think the question has to be a bit more holistic and try to understand the impact and the opportunities that COVID gave us to understand how are we going to replan, take this step to replan and think about what we're going to do. According to your experience, how accessible, economically speaking, is to have a green school? How possible? Well, the concept of green school, the way the Israeli educational program is structured, can be very profitable. A green school is not just a school the way I presented it. It can be a rural school in Ghana, which respects the context where we're living and respects energy consumption or water consumption. But if I have to give clear examples in Israel, well, in Israel, the green schools, what they do is they take the roofs and the water there, they gather it together in tanks and they go to the bathrooms. Can you imagine the amount of water that an educational institution saves as far as waters collected from the roofs and taken to the bathrooms. Someone has the microphone on. Then we have, yeah, we need to turn off the microphones. So yeah, that's just an example, but there are many examples. For example, in my time, they used to do recycling of specific products. When they would select these specific products, they would have these massive cycles. If the country has a recycling system. So there's a series of examples. In Israel, we're using a lot the solar panels. So there's a series of policies that can generate savings in a green school. But not everything is about savings. At least in Israel, 99.9% of education is what we call public education. Resources come from the state. So these savings are reinvested in education. But in each one of these difficulties or sections, energy, water, resources, you can find a way to generate income more than an expense. And based on this, give more life to schools. You can organize fairs, trade fairs at a level of the community, or an exchange in a green school. They take care of the books every year instead of having to buy new ones. They will take care of, not to print so much pages or sheets of paper. What we're missing, Juliana, it's a change in our mindset, the way we see our reality, and how willing we are to make this switch and understand that our conduct is not the right one, and what the guidelines are for good conduct. And after this, the sky is the limit. There's no limit. You can reach the furthest away places because there's always space to improve. Thank you very much. And we have one last question to close this space. How can we have human beings have a more realistic and practical awareness before we reach a point of infection where we have no return, to the conditions that we need? Wow, what a difficult question. How to reach everyone? Well, first of all, unquestionably, scientific dissemination and information is key. These types of congresses and conferences are fundamental. And second, we need to have a green generation. If they can understand these concepts, it will help the future. In the room, this is statistics. In the room, we have in your schools, the future president of Colombia or the future minister of education. If we're able to educate students today with value, with knowledge, with right content, when they reach those positions, they will make right decisions, the correct decisions. So how can we do it? By doing it by thousands. We need to disseminate this everywhere, because the point of no return, every year the UN tells us what the point of no return is, but it is up to us to create the hope that there's always a point of return. We can always go back and improve the society where we are to make this a better world. Let's not lose this hope of improving the world. But unquestionably, I do think it's difficult to convince those who are convinced already that education has a key answer in these processes, because we as adults, as young people, somehow already kind of did our part. We can, yes, in part we can change our behavior, but we're reaching our point of no return, while young people are not. They can make the difference. This activism, these principles demanded by green schools have an important role for those who graduate. Those types of events that we're holding are one of the key responses. Juliana, before I say goodbye, I simply want to thank you for the invitation. I hope somehow this can give basis for some other things that will happen in the Congress, and I am available for whatever you need, and want understanding always that together it's easier, and that together we can reach better places. I hope we can do so on this occasion. Thank you very much, and a lot of success in these conferences. Thank you very much for wanting to have a better world for everyone and for our children.
Bueno, ahora Queremos hacer un pequeño
Now we want to go to a break.
videos que hemos preparado con mucho cariño para todos ustedes. En 10 minutos nos volvemos a ver en este encuentro.
So in 10 minutes, we'll meet again and we'll have a short 10-minute break.
No veo nada de lo de YouTube, no entiendo quién está conectado. Necesito una recomendación.
Diego,
Nos quedan 20 segundos.
Diego, ¿qué le recomiendas a Juan Pablo? ¿Hacerla en inglés o en
Rápidamente, que lo haga en
español?
español, que lo haga en español.
Listo, español. ¿Listos? Vamos con cuenta regresiva.
Mariu, voy a hacer 10 minutos y cambio contigo,
Vamos en
¿listo?
5, 4, 3,
habiliten el
2,
módulo, por
sí,
favor,
señora, 1.
módulo. No lo tengo. No tengo el módulo.
Turn off the video, Dr. M.
No tengo módulo, Byron. Byron.
Ya está el módulo.
Muy bien. Gracias a todos por acompañarnos.
Thank you very much for being with us. I remind you that we're in our first summit of Green Generation, educating leaders for sustainability of tomorrow. So at this point, we will begin with all the pedagogic experiences of schools which will share with us today. So let's give way to Diego José Nieves, teacher and PRAE leader, Diego Armando Acosta, leader, teacher of coexisting with the Sinú River, Daniela Charri, student at Juan 23, Isaac González, student at Juan 23, and they will share their experiences in the project coexisting with the Sinú River. So go ahead with your intervention.
Por favor, ¿no pueden habilitar la cámara?
Ya estamos en esas.
Hola. Sí, hola, ¿me escuchan?
Te oímos perfecto. Bienvenidos. Gracias por estar acá y querer compartir.
Thank you for being here and wanting to share with us your knowledge. Good morning. My name is Diego José Nieves Vergara, coordinator of coexistence at Juan 23 School, leader of the project coexisting with the Sinú River. The educational institution Juan 23 is located to the left
on the left margin of the
city
Sinú River in Montería, made up totally by parents of the strata 1 and 2, and we're neighbors or to this big spine, which is the Sinú River, one of the most biodiverse rivers in the world. The experience is to implement actions by the community that will allow reforestation and recovery of the gallery forest of the Sinú River. Right now, what we're doing here is to recover that forest of these water basin with native trees. The project is made up by students, by teachers, parents, and there we are doing activities all the time, which include in the project from the production in greenhouses of native forest species to their subsequent planting in the basin, in the river basin. All the students in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, they learn how to qualify or seed or prepare the substrate. They learn also about production in these greenhouses in each one of these native plants, what is the species they belong to. And we have been connecting this with natural science area, with statistics, Spanish language. So we've been sort of like cross-linking this project with all of these areas. How did the project start? At the very beginning, at the institution, we had problems, coexistence problems. We have a school where we had people that had been displaced by violence. So we saw the need to connect this, to connect the environmental work with interpersonal relationships of our students, to the point that the only requirement to form part of this Conviviendo project was that the students had discipline problems. So that way they would improve their interpersonal relationships and the relationship of that student with the environment. So that way we started moving forward until we were able to have about 80–90% improvement in interpersonal relationships of our students. And these are students that really love the environment. And they love our water basin of the Rio Sinu, and they love the river, and they improved in their behavior, the students, and also in the academic part. So right now, we don't have any discipline problems, basically, and the project made changes in students that really want to be in the project and who love the environment. What are the problems that we need to deal with in our water basin? The Sinu River represents the food subsistence of all the inhabitants of the department of Córdoba. Our basin, our water basin of Rio Sinu goes through 22 municipalities, where in the food part and in the infrastructure part, because we use the river a lot, for transportation, they depend economically, all these people depend economically, or in the vast majority, all the inhabitants of this basin depend on the river for their food supply, and it's a transport means also. And we're going to incentivize river transportation in Monteria. And Monteria developed because of the river. Before we had roads, the only transport means was, or to other departments, was the Sinu River. So it has been developed economically fully, both the city of Monteria and all the nearby municipalities, the ones that are nearby the basin. What are the consequences, the negative consequences that we had with the Aburrá Dam? The Urrá Dam is a hydroelectrical dam that was built at the birth of the river, in the river that has the same name, the Urrá. And the consequence of this was the largest environmental impacts in the world. And this was the impact that it caused in our water basin, because we know that our river does not keep the water levels that we need to have in the summer or in the winter seasons. And in those 2 seasons before the Urrá Dam, the level of the river went down, and then during the winter it went up. But now with that dam, during the summer we can see the river full, and it causes some flooding also. The river has lost flow, and it has been reduced enormously because the dam, the Urrá Dam, collects the water to produce energy, but that produces a reduction in the flow of our Sinu River, which has caused erosion on our basin, our water basin, and the landslides of the sides of the river, and many trees fall into the waters of the Sinu River. What are the objectives of our project? Our general objective is to consolidate a sustainable forest development process on the riverbanks of the Sinu River, oriented to make sensitize the educational community, making sure that there is coexistence with the environment. In the specific objectives, we intend to design and apply strategies that will allow the conservation and reforestation of the Sinu River. And we also want to have the students that have behavioral problems and low academic fulfillment and academic change. What are the methodologies and actions that we have been implementing in this beautiful project? First, we sensitized all the educational community and all the inhabitants of our beautiful city of Monteria about the care and conservation of the environment. We've given training to all the students to produce native forest species. We have also trained the directors of other educational institutions about which are those native forest species that we have in our region that we have to take care of. We have also identified the areas where we are going to have an intervention with the project. In other words, the members of this project of coexistence with the Sinú River, we go through the river identifying the areas where we're going to have an intervention when there is erosion in order to plant the native trees. During these planting journeys, we do 4 of them every year on the basin of the Sinú River and in the micro basins also of the river. During the implementation, what do? We have implemented 2 greenhouses, an external one, external to the educational institution right now found in Arenal, rural area, which belongs to the municipality of Monteria, where we have the students between 9th, 10th, and 11th grades that do their production in the greenhouse, and the school greenhouse also, external, on 4th and 5th primary, that produce those trees that are going to be planted in the basin, in the water basin. And then later, we are giving feedback about our project. We are giving feedback about our project by applying a matrix of weak strengths and threads, weaknesses, strengths, and So now I'm going to leave you with Daniela Charri, who will explain the results of the project. Good morning, I am Daniela Charri Gomez. I'm a student of the Juan 23 Educational Institution, 9th grader. We have had the following results. We have recovered 22 kilometers of the riverbank from the Jaraque with native forest species. We have also produced 14,300 plantules of different species in our greenhouse of the project. And we have recovered in Caño La Caimanera 1,500 trees, native forest trees. Other results that our project has had is that since the project began up to this moment, we have planted on the riverbanks of the river 7,060 trees, 1,500 in the Caño La Caimanera, 1,200 that we have donated to the different cattle raisers, 320 trees donated to educational institutions for their projects, the projects that they have, 450 trees to the National Environmental Police, and 18 planted in the reconciliation lot. We had a mega planting with the disasters that we had in the Amazon in the previous years. This was something that we did, and we were involved in this mega planting of trees. We had all the community from Monteria that went there for this planting, and we planted 800 of these native trees. And now Isaac, my colleague, is going to tell you what has to do with this acknowledgement and the awards that we have gained in our project. Good morning. My name is Isaac David Gonzalez Delgado. I'm the leader of the project of the coexistence with Rio Sinú. This has had some acknowledgement and awards since 2016 up to 2020. These are the acknowledgements and awards. We had the second place in the Vivo Awards. We have represented Monteria in the National Educational Forum. The Swiss embassy, when they saw that we were doing this project with the environment, donated $500,000 so that the institution will be a bioclimate institution, the first bioclimatic school in the country. Monteria has represented for us since 2016 up to this date as the greenest institution. We have been nominated the best environmental project, the best institution in coexistence in peace. Thank you to the project. The results obtained have been positive. The students not only interact with environmental education, but also with other subjects, for example, statistics, biology, IT, and others, reflecting positive results in each one of those knowledge areas that are distinguished in their school tasks. In the table, we can see the improvement of the students from the first to the fourth period. The period is made up by 54 students, all of them with academic and discipline problems. During the first period, we had 17 students from ninth grade, and fourth and fifth grade, we had 37 students. In the second period, the numbers went down. From 17, we only had 6 of them of ninth grade. And fourth and fifth grade of 37 students, we only had 9, and so on and so forth, as you can see on the table in the third period, until we got to the fourth period. On the fourth period, we had no students with academic or discipline problems of any sort. So this is thanks to the project. The students have had a disciplinary and academic improvement obeying to the educational institution in its presentation. What are our recommendations? We have been recommending all the inhabitants of the city of Monteria that it is our duty to take care and preserve our Rio Sinu, the Sinu River, because it gives us a lot of flora and fauna, and we have to carry out actions for its care and conservation to improve the quality of life of the people from Monteria and the quality of the river. Learnings. The students in the project have learned to adopt a critical and reflective attitude that can bring about some new and better ways of coexistence of men with nature through the consolidation of values and improvement actions. Thank you for listening to our project. I hope you've liked it.
Bueno, pues muchísimas.
Thank you very much to the three of you for sharing your knowledge, and we value this space, and we also value the time you take for us. Thank you very much. Thanks to you for giving us the opportunity to show you our project in this very important event. Now we want to invite Steve Hyman, Director of the St. Patrick Catholic School, Norfolk, the United States, members of the Laudato Si Committee, and the students of 7th and 8th grade of that school in the United States, with its experience called Taking Care Together of Our Home. Now, we are waiting to hear your experience, the experience you prepared for us.
Hello, welcome to Caring for Our Home Together. I am Jan White, Director of Studies at St. Patrick Catholic School, and I send you greetings from Norfolk, Virginia. Since 2005, St. Patrick Catholic School has devoted its efforts to environmental sustainability and students' intentional and total formation. Inspired by Pope Francis' encyclical, Caring for Our Common Home, our school's principal, Steve Hammond, formed a committee, Laudato Si, composed of teachers, staff, parents, and students. This committee is responsible for numerous inspiring projects throughout our school's history, and we are excited to share with you an overview of our efforts. We believe our students' experiences to care for our school campus and our larger community will lay the foundation for future leaders. To that end, we will begin with a video narrated by Laudato Si Committee student members. Afterward, Dr. Rick Strauss and Mrs. Meg LaSalle, two teachers who have championed environmental education at St. Patrick, will further describe the program. Finally, we are happy to answer any of your questions near the conclusion of the presentation. Well, Jorge or Patricia, will you be sharing the video or shall I?
You will, please do.
You can, and what you can do is be sure to share it with the 2 check marks checked for optimizing video and sound. Thanks.
No.
2 check marks on the bottom part when you share.
Oh, those 2. All right.
Okay, but I don't have anything.
Desktop. You're gonna be desktop, so hit share on the bottom right. And oh gosh, you're not the center.
And after you click on share, you see those 2 check marks on the bottom part.
We do.
And you have to hit let's see here. Oh my gosh. Okay. Can I join it from here?
It is a Vimeo video, and so we are trying to get that up. We sent it in advance, and so we're trying to figure that part out.
Okay.
System preferences.
System preferences, Jen.
And then
For where?
let's see here.
From here. System preferences.
So it should have. Oh wait, go back. There's a little locked box that just popped up right there. Hit that.
Okay.
And then allow. Yeah.
Okay.
And now.
If you want to send it via chat,
We
our
can
technicians can show it for you.
we can do that as well.
Do you only have the video, or do you have a presentation as well, PowerPoint or Keynote?
We have both. I will send, would you like me to send it to everyone?
Sure.
All right, I will send the Vimeo right now in the chat.
Good. It's there. And the presentation, when you share the presentation, I mean the Keynote or the PowerPoint, be sure to click on both check marks.
Yes.
Very nice to see you, Jan.
Very good to see you as well.
Wait, do you want us to put up the video right now?
Yes, please.
Okay, hold on.
At St. Patrick Catholic School, we are taught that God created the earth and it's our job to take care of all of God's creations. Inspired by Pope Francis's encyclical, the school created a special committee, the Laudato Si Committee, which I am proud to be a member of. We are a group of students, faculty, staff, and parents that focus on environmental sustainability.
8th grade students in the Laudato Si Committee meet weekly to discuss how our school community can be better stewards of our
miracle of creation and the importance of even the tiniest of God's creations.
We are blessed to have an outdoor classroom and dock on campus, along with a beehive and a wildflower garden that is maintained by volunteer master gardeners.
In middle school, our studies deepen. We learn about the ecosystems at work in our own backyard. For several years, the 6th grade has been raising oysters to be added to the local oyster reefs and tracking the growth of these oysters at school. And we get a chance to share our knowledge with our fellow students. These 8th grade students turned their recycling efforts into an igloo play structure for the kindergarten students.
We learn all together on Earth Day. The whole school is outside. We are so lucky to have local organizations and universities participate.
At St. Patrick's, we love to serve God by serving others. Students lead service projects at our school, and many revolve around protecting our planet.
In the Little Sprouts After School Club, students work side by side with master gardeners. The food we grow is donated to feed the poor.
We collect plastic bags and plastic film for Trex to be transformed into deck building materials. We collected Crayola markers for the Crayola Cycle Recycling Project.
At lunch, we have worked to reduce our waste. We donate food waste to pigs at a local farm. We recycle our milk cartons, and we save the water that students don't drink and use it in the garden.
Our dedication to learning about the earth and taking care of our planet does not end when we leave St. Patrick's.
And now that we have alumni entering the workforce, we can't wait to see what WaFound's accomplished to protect our planet.
You're on, Jen.
Okay. Can you see the screen? Can you see our slides?
Yes.
No, not yet.
me figure it out. Click unlock. Can they ask them if they can show it?
What kind of a
The-
file is it?
Right, it is a Google file, and it is saying that the system's preferences will not allow us. So if you could share the
Okay.
Google Slides, we would be.
Yes, I'll do that
Okay.
right now.
Super. In the meantime, this is Dr. Richard Strauss, one of my champions of environmental sustainability at St. Patrick.
Great. Okay, so you can see our slides. So we're happy to be here today. I am life science and biology teacher here at St. Patrick Catholic School. Our school is located on 11 acres in Norfolk, Virginia. Our campus is on a tidal inlet of the Lafayette River. We have 419 students in pre-K through 8th grade. Next slide. So our one of the major projects that we did for our outdoor classroom is a wildflower garden. This was funded by a grant and many donations, but the purpose of the garden was to help children learn about seasonal changes and pollinator activity. This was the core of our outdoor classroom, and since that time, it's grown to include a pier and dock, a greenhouse, bluebird nesting boxes, a compost garden, a pavilion, and then I'll show you our beehive. Next slide, please. So we, on our little tidal inlet, we are raising oysters every year. We get a new batch of oyster spat. 6th graders monitor them all year long, every month, to watch their growth, and that's part of an experiment that we do to see which of 2 methods of rearing the oysters gives better growth. And then at the end of the school year, we donate our oysters to be added to an oyster reef in one of the local rivers. Next slide. And then we also have a honeybee hive, which we work with the local Beekeepers Association. We harvest honey from our hive once a year. And our bees are very active pollinators in our wildflower garden, as well as in plants, trees, and flowers in the neighboring 3 miles. So our hive works well. There you go. Thanks.
Good afternoon. My name is Meg LaSalle. I'm a 2nd grade teacher here at St. Patrick's in Norfolk. Our recycling and repurposing programs are fundamental to our environmental education, and it starts at a very young age. Our students are taught from pre-K to 8th grade to reduce their food waste, and we have actually done food audits in our dining hall where we measure our food waste and try to reduce that as much as possible. One of our repurposing efforts has been to donate our food waste to a local pig farmer who uses it to subsidize his his pig feed. So we sort and our vegetables and fruits and grains and donate it to them. Next slide, please. Thank you. Earth Day is a huge part of our education and our environmental education here at St. Patrick's. It is on the National Earth Day. We are all outside from pre-K to 8th grade, and we have 38 to 40 community leaders who come and put on expeditions for our students, and they rotate through age-appropriate lessons and activities ranging from recycling relays to beehives and bird watching and tree identification. And one of the most popular ones is using solar energy to melt the marshmallows and make s'mores. And then last slide, we recognize that teacher education is absolutely fundamental. So we have continued education for our teachers because we recognize that in order to get these environmental lessons inside the classrooms, these teachers need to be comfortable and confident in the material. So we partner with a large variety of organizations who have offered scholarships to our teachers so that we can keep them informed and keep them educated so that these lessons and get back into the classroom.
So we've received several recognitions, awards, and a few grants for all of our efforts to sustain the environment. And we continue to grow in our interest and our efforts. And we are happy to share any of our resources with you. At this time, we'd like to pause for any of your questions, but we thank you for your time and your patience as we were juggling the technology pieces. But we hope that the visuals could speak more than any words that we could provide you. So if you have any questions at this time for Dr. Strauss, Mrs. LaSalle, or me, I'm happy to join.
The questions part is going to be after all the presentations.
Tenemos muchas preguntas para ustedes, claro que sí. Los queremos invitar a que nos esperen. Terminamos.
Yes, we have lots of questions for you. We want you to wait until we finish with the experiences of all the pedagogic schools. It's 3 more or 2 more after you. So please wait and until the end so we can ask you the questions. Don't disconnect. No, que no se desconecten. Esperamos que tengan un exitoso encuentro. Thank you very much. And congratulations for your awards and your experiences. You will help us very much for our actions at school.
A Wilson Alexander Rincón. Él es
Now we'll have Wilson Alexander Rincón, PRAE coordinator, Santiago Paredes, a student at Las Acacias, Municipality of La Plata, with his experience called Coexisting with Environmental Education in the Rural Areas. Good morning, everyone. We thank you for this space. Let me interrupt. I think you don't have your camera on. We're not seeing you, Wilson.
Listo, ahora sí.
Okay, great. So good morning, everyone, again. I want to thank you for this space. We are representative of Las Acacias, the school, and I'm going to share to begin my presentation.
Bueno, mi nombre es Wilson Alexander Rincón
My
Arevalo.
name is Wilson Alexander Rincón Arevalo. I am an agronomist engineer, specialist in education and magister in education for the diversity. Teacher at Las Acacias, Municipality of La Plata, Huila, Colombia. My name is Santiago Paredes Rojas, a student at Las Acacias. I'm right now in grade 11. I'm the leader student for the PRAE project.
Nuestra institución se encuentra ubicada en el departamento del Huila, municipio de La Plata, en la cordillera central. Nos encontramos.
We are in the middle mountain range at the basin of Rio Guacatal. Our institution is a rural institution. We have today a principal, we have an administrative person, 21 teachers, and we have 409 students, varying from peasants and displaced people.
Bueno, para nosotros es muy importante la parte ambiental en nuestra región. Resulta que a pesar de estar en una zona rural.
For us, the environmental aspect is very important. 80% of our students have no internet connection. 20% of them have no cellular signal. And in education, when we tried to look for the same path in our institution, we tried to develop the PRAE project in order to create an environmental culture for our students. It's a process that leads you from preschool to 12th grade. So as you can see from the pictures, we've had inconveniences with the environmental area because there have been some landslides, because sometimes water accumulates and creates floods. So we're in a rural area. In 2016, we had a geological incident, lots of rain and landslides. And as you can see in the pictures, some of our headquarters were directly affected, the access roads also. So thousands of hectares, and it almost fell down and endangered the lives of many families living around. So with that process of awareness, we realized that despite the fact that we were in a rural area, in a mountain area, the climate change effect were already beginning to affect us. So right now, we're making the presentation of a student who is an indigenous community member from the Nasa community. She's going to talk about her native tongue, Nasa Juve, and from their own cosmovision, they help us value and take care of the environment.
Napi ya de un spanka un ya se Jessica Tatiana Mensa Chule un se que uso yata institución educativa en las acacias ficha huachamos de capilla se chiquiquín. Muy buenos días para todos, un cordial saludo a los estudiantes, a los padres, familias, a las gentes. Mi nombre es Jessica Tatiana Mensa Chule.
My name is Jessica Tatiana Mesa Chulo. I am from the Narwantama Indian settlement or community. I am a student at Las Acacias.
Bueno, aquí les estoy dando la información sobre el medio ambiental, que es sobre la tala de árboles y...
I'm giving information on felling of trees and some other activities so that it coincides with us, because for now, we as students we're no longer doing this and hunting animals, because they're the ones who give us the strength and the energy so that we can continue working as peasants. Thank you very much.
Del proyecto PRAE hemos empezado a realizar jornadas de concientización para demostrarles a nuestras comunidades y estudiantes que debemos de cuidar el medio ambiente.
Se inicia un proceso de concientización con estudiantes, padres de familia.
We began an awareness program for students and families regarding the importance of taking care of the environment, and we started by traveling around some places in our region because we are sure that we needed to become familiar with the emblematic places. You don't love what you don't know. So we started with this process, and the students of 10th grade, 12th grade are helping us begin this process with preschool kids until 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade in their awareness process.
With the assistance of entities of our region,
we have
started doing activities such as tree planting, cleaning journeys with the communities. In the process, we've had the support of government entities such as CAM, the municipal mayorship have joined. Thanks to the assistance of educational institutions, we are trying to carry out activities to keep our environment or to protect our environment. Now we will present the teachers of the institution. For us to be able to do this kind of work, we are doing the connection of content from the different areas of the study and in all the different grades in the school. Good morning. I am Mayerly Pallecio Paredes Riojas. I work in religious sciences and I graduated at the Javeriana University in Colombia. I work at the institution in Cachipay. This is a headquarters that has methodology of new school with preschool to fifth grade. We work with all the different areas and all the mandatory projects. Among them, we have the PRIME project, which is a project that we work not only with the children, but also with the educational community in general, teaching them to be aware and to value the environment and the use of natural resources. We are an area where the water resource is basic and essential because there we are located in the Macizo Colombiano, which is the mountain range, which is vital and important for their conservation. So we work with the PRICE project in the reforestation of natural basins of our basins and their conservation. And we motivate the parents to help the conservation of this environment to help not only our generation, but future generations and teaching our children how to use them. We have been using this methodology. We've been working with Professor Alexander Rincon and the students and the leaders of the project. So that has been our work in this institution. Thank you very much. Fraternal greetings. I am Diana Rocio Carvajal Calvache. I am a teacher of basics and Spanish or Castilian, and I work at the University of Tolima, and I work in humanities and Spanish in the Acacias Educational Institution in La Plata, Huila. For the ministry, the prime is trying to understand the environmental needs from the natural, psychochemical, and biological conditions, and also human with their democratic, social, and economic implications, both political and cultural. And therefore, in our community, we see the PRIME project as an opportunity to articulate different topics and find joint solutions to contribute not only to the improvement of the environmental conditions interinstitutionally, but also the local problems that we have. So the students, when they are in contact with the different actors of the community, such as the farmers, the environmental authorities, indigenous groups, amongst others, they can carry out an exchange of dialogue knowledge to strengthen the project and that way create citizens awareness of their responsibility and decisions so that the student can generate significant changes not only in their life and in the classroom but also in the future. Thank you very much. It is important for us the inclusion of parents in this activity. So we need that each one of you from your homes help us to plant a seed in the children. So we are also introducing you with a parent. Por favor, apagar el micrófono. Thank you very much. I am Sneijder Olaya. I am a parent at the educational institution Las Acacias for about 11 years. I have, my son is in 11th grade and I have a daughter in 6th grade. So we're implementing with the teachers at the institution the PRICE program. It has been a blessing for us because we used to see things very simple and we sometimes don't value what we have. So this project for me has been very important because they've taught us to take care of nature and value all the things we have around us and to see with other eyes what we have, the things we have, the wealth that we have. And it is a blessing to be able to transmit this love for the things that we have. And it has been also a blessing, the teachers from the institution, because they have been there all the time, giving us a guideline or guidelines and